Today we're going to be learning Taanit Daf Kaf Hey. We're getting toward the end of the Masechet. Next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, on Sunday, we will have our Siyum. Just to review, we're on one of these Siyums where the Siyum really is Monday, so that means Sunday. We're going to have regular Daf Shiur in the morning. Anyone joining the Siyum later that day should make sure to learn Sunday's Daf beforehand, and then Monday's Daf we'll learn at the Siyum, which will take place at 8:30 p.m. Israel time, wherever that is where you are. And that will be on Zoom. And I hope you can all join. So registration's already up. You can get there from the homepage of the site. If you're in Israel, there's a bunch of Siyumim happening around. Also in America, if you're part of a WhatsApp group, there's a bunch of groups that are meeting up. And then to celebrate the Siyum together. If you're in a group and you're not meeting up, if you want, you can suggest to meet up. It's nice to kind of get together and celebrate the Siyum with people in person as well. In Israel, we're going to have a bunch of Siyums, most of them in Hebrew. One will be in English and Renana at 8:15 Monday morning. If mornings work for you and if you happen to be around, you can join. We're going to it'll be a little bit different. We'll finish the Masechet and do a little bit of Chavruta learning for the beginning of Masechet Megillah. I thought to spice it up a little, do something a little bit different and have some Chavruta learning. In Yerushalayim, I'm also teaching at the Siyum there with Rabbanit Karen Kirschenbaum. That will be Monday night, and that will be on Zoom. That's in Hebrew at 8 o'clock Monday night. And so again, there's no regular Shiur Monday morning. For everyone to know that. In Modi'im, Rabbanit Chamutal Shoval will be teaching from Daf Mishalahen. There's also Siyumim in Efrat, Hoshaya, Netanya, Zichron Yaakov, Neve Daniel. There's a Siyum on Zoom for Haredi women. They have a group that learn, and in Midrash and it's even in Be'er B'Yerucham, they're going to be Siyums. So go find a Siyum near you and learn. Okay, Tuesday's a fast day, but I see someone's asking, but we're learning as usual. We're starting Masechet Megillah on Tuesday morning. So with that, we will get started. Okay. We were in the middle of talking about Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, who is a type of miracle man, and he is able to bring rain. He's able to stop rain. Whatever he wants, he gets. And we're going to see that in a number of stories. There's going to be a theme about these stories. A lot of them have to do with his neighbors. We're going to see all different kinds of neighbors. He's got some neighbors that are out to get him or trip him up or something like that. And there are some neighbors that are just come to him for advice. Now, as you can imagine, if you live next to some miracle man, right, there's two possible reactions. Either you're very jealous and you want to kind of say, oh, something weird is going on here, and let me try to see if I can somehow make problems. And the other option is, oh, well, I have a miracle man here. I need some help. He's the guy to go to. So we're going to have stories of both of those types about Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. So now we have the end of the page. Okay. Hava Regila Debitu. So we ended with saying basically this Bakol goes out every day and says basically how Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, right? Everyone is sustained because of Hanina ben Dosa, but he basically has one kav of carobs from week to week. And he's basically living in a place where he's got really nothing going on. So now Hava Regila Debitu Lemecham Tanura Kol Male de Shabta. Okay. His wife would open she would turn on her oven every Erev Shabbat, which was a pretty good time, right? In general, people turn on their ovens on Erev Shabbat. And Shadya Aktarta, but instead of cooking, what would she do? She would basically put in something that would smoke up and make it look like she was cooking, even though she wasn't really cooking. Okay. So now why? She didn't want people to think that she had nothing, right? No food in her house. She was basically embarrassed. Mishum kisufa, the Gemara says, right? She was totally embarrassed that she had no food in her house, and she didn't want people to know that. So what does she do? She basically smokes something up so that the neighbors, remember their ovens were outdoors generally, so their neighbors would see smoke going. Now, one of her neighbors kind of got wind of what was going on. She had a bit of an evil, deceptive kind of person that was living next to her. We all know sometimes you end up with neighbors like that. Look, I know she's really got nothing going on. That's the truth. I see what's going on here. So she says, Azlu tarfa abava, I'm going to go knock on the door. Indorona, sorry about that. Indorona. So what happened? She says, I'm going to go and the wife says, I'm going to go indoors. And basically it's it's interesting. This indoors, basically. She goes all the way in. I don't think there's really a connection. I tried to look it up, but it doesn't sound like it's connected. But she basically goes into an inner room because she wants to hide. She doesn't want this woman to see her. That's what happens. She knows the woman's going to walk into her courtyard on the way into her house, and she's going to see that there's nothing in the oven. So she goes all the way inside. Eat avid lanisa, but a miracle happens. What happened? She finds, the neighbor finds this oven full of bread. And the bowl where she would knead the dough is full of dough. So she says to her, planita, planita. The woman says, plonit, plonit. Aita masa, the kacharich lalachma. Go bring a utensil to quickly get the bread off remember the bread was always baked on the sides of the walls. You had to do ridiat hapat. We've learned that before. So go get the utensil that you used to take the bread off the walls of the oven because it's full of bread, right? The neighbor obviously realized she was totally wrong. Amrala, so she said, right, maybe, it's unclear, but maybe the neighbor's saying, you don't even know you have bread here because a miracle just happened. Could be that she's kind of mocking her when she says that, to which is maybe why it prompts this response. Amrala, so the wife says back to her, why do you think I went into this room inside? It was because I was going to get the utensils so I could take the bread out. In other words, I knew this was going to happen. And the Braita about this says, Tana, she wasn't just saying, it's partly maybe she was just lying and saying it to basically save face and say, oh, of course I knew that all along. I knew it was full of bread. But the Braita says, she really did go in. The reason she went in wasn't because she was embarrassed and she wanted to hide. No, she went in to bring the utensil. Why? Even though she had nothing in her oven. She was used to miracles happening and she figured God would save her face and bring a miracle. Amrele debitu. Now, okay, that's story number one. Story number two, the wife goes to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa one day. You can imagine this would happen. And she says to him, I'm just going to remind you that we talked about this root sa'ar and how the root comes up many, many times. You're going to see it a whole slew of times today as well. She said, how much longer can we go suffering like this? It's enough. Enough is enough, right? It's like the shoemaker's children, or the shoemaker who goes barefoot, right? Has no shoes. You're the one who brings food to everybody. How could it be? Right? That's how we ended yesterday. The kol olam kuloni zom mishum chanina. He brings sustenance to everybody, and yet he has nothing. So how could it be, what about us? So Amrala, meine avid. Remember this question because this question is going to come up soon, but she's going to be the one asking the question next. So he says to her, what do you want me to do? So she says the obvious, by rachamei de nitve lachmidi, right? Go ask God for rachamim so that he'll bring some food for us. And you pray to him for everyone else. Pray to God for us as well, right? This is classic where there's all these people always who help everybody else, but they don't necessarily help themselves. So by Rachame, so he listens to his wife, like a good husband, listens to his wife, and he yatzda kimim pisat yad, all of a sudden a hand or a palm comes out from nowhere. By the way, I'm just going to point this out. I see, Caroline, you're writing that she doesn't have a name. And we're going to see even later, this comes up even more, that she doesn't have a name at all. It's very interesting. So this hand comes out, the Yave lechad kara diptora dedava. Out in the hand that came out from out of nowhere comes a golden leg of a table, which sounds great, right? That's a big piece of gold. They're going to have money. All is great. However, right, good Talmudic stories don't end like that. Chazai bechelma, she sees in a dream. Interesting, she's the one who has the dream. In the world to come, the tzaddikim, the righteous people, are going to be eating on tables that have three-legged tables. And she, and presumably there's a nusach that says she and her husband, Chanina, are eating on a two-legged table. Basically, what does this mean? This is what we've always talked about in all these sources. If you get your reward in this world, you won't get it in the next world. So in the end, they got this leg early, this golden leg, but it should have been on a table that they're getting in the future. So now, Amrale. So now, okay, so I see, Ruth, you're saying that it says he had the dream. I thought I saw that she had the dream. Yeah, Rashi says, Chazi debitu b'chalma. The wife had the dream about it, Rashi says. So I don't know where you see that he had it, but in general, the story is very confusing in terms of who said what. Right now in the Gemara, it says, Amrale, she said to him, but some nuschaot say he said. So there's all different versions of who said what and what it was. So whether he says or she says, nichalach te mechal achle. Right. So Ruth, you're pointing out this line, not the previous line. He said to her, I've seen in a dream. I see. I don't know. Anyway, this is the part where it's unclear whether he said or she said. So either he says or she says that basically one of us, that do you want to be in the future where everyone else has it like this and you have it different? Which is interesting because in this world, they're very different than everybody else. But I guess in the next world, they were hoping at least there will be like everybody else. And here, right, he's saying either he's saying or she's saying, do you want to be different in the next world? So now Amrale, she says to him, Umayne Avid. So what should we do now? Right. In the beginning, she was the one pushing and he was saying, what do we do now? In this case, she says, what do we do? Which therefore makes a little more sense to say that he was the one who said it. Okay, even if maybe she had dreamed it again, different. Clearly, there's different opinions here. See, Adam wrote the Ein Yaakov. It writes that he was the one who had the dream. So again, one of them has a dream. One of them responds. We're not sure who's who. And then he says, "So what should we do?" And then the suggestion becomes again, it's not clear who says this. Maybe she herself says it. Okay, well, just like you asked for it, let's buy rachame, dinishkalinu minach. Let's pray that they take it away. Buy rachame v'shakluhu. So he prays again. He listens to his wife. He prays again, and they take it away. Tana gadol hayanes acharon yoter min harishon. The second miracle was greater than the first miracle. Why is that? We already know this. Degemiri demeav yave mishkalosh shakla. It's much easier to ask for something. It's much more difficult to ask to take it away. Okay, which is right. We talked about that with the rain. That Rochoni said, if too much rain comes, I won't ask to take that back. Okay, so that's the end of this story. Before we move on, I just want to point out a few things that we've seen already in other stories, which is be careful what you wish for. You might not really want it when you get it, right? That's number one. Number two, once God gives you something, it's very hard to take it back. But you see that Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, he's right. We've seen before that some of these rabbis weren't willing to use things that came from miracles and weren't willing to ask for miracles for everything. He seems to be okay with that. Okay. And we're going to see it from stories going forward as well. One day, Ben Hashmashot, right, which is that twilight time where it was Erev Shabbat. So already Shabbat had come in. He sees his daughter very unhappy. Amrala biti l'mayat tziva. Why are you so unhappy? Amrale. I had a bottle of oil and I had a bottle of vinegar and they got switched. And I don't know. And I ended up, what happened? I lit the candles with vinegar instead of with oil. Now I'm worried they're going to go out. Why is it such a big deal they go out? Well, first of all, it's Shabbat. They can't relight it. And it's not like today, worst case, our candles go out. But they have no light in their house. Remember, they're poor. This is their only light. So she's all worried it's going to go out. We're learning this right after the last day of Hanukkah. Miracle of Hanukkah happens to them. Amarla, biti ma'ich patlach. My daughter, what do you care? Misha amar l'shemen v'yidlok. Whoever decided that oil should burn, which is God. Hu yomar l'chometz v'yidlok. He can make vinegar light also. Tana and the Braita says about this, Hayad dolek v'holech kol hayom kulo ad sheviu mimenu or lahavdalah. It lasted all day, the entire day of Shabbat, until they were able to even use it for the candle for Havdalah. Okay, that's the miracle of the oil. Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa, another story about him. He had a bunch of goats. Now, you might say he had no food. How could he possibly have goats? We're going to get to that at the end of the story. They're going to ask, how could it possibly be he had goats? They're going to have two issues with him having goats, but we'll get to that later. So he had some goats. Amrule, kamif sedan. Comes his neighbor. Okay, so we have another neighbor now. Comes, knocks on the door and says, hey, your goats are ruining my fields. Right, which is classic with goats, right? They eat in other people's fields. It says, your goats are ruining my fields. Amal, right? Classic neighbor encounter, right? Your thing is causing problems in my garden or my this. Okay, so Amal, he says the following. If you're right, then nichlinu dube. Then basically what will happen? Bears will come and eat the goats. Be'ilo, but if you're not right, each goat will grab a bear on its horns tonight. Okay, so basically, you'll see the goats kill a bear and bring it back. So what happens? In fact, he was right. His goats were not doing anything. This was just the neighbor trying to make issues with him. But each one came back with a goat in its horns. Okay, next story. There was a neighbor, the Kabanya Beta, Velomatu Kishure. She built a house, but what happened was the beams that were supposed to go on the ceiling weren't long enough to go from wall to wall. So what'd she do? She goes to her neighbor, the miracle maker. The beams didn't get to the walls. Amar la mashmech, what's your name? Amra li iku. Okay, interesting. We talked about his wife doesn't have a name, but here the neighbor, right, he asked, what's your name? Her name is Iku, bit of a strange name. So Amar Iku, which is really like, if so, that's really the meaning of Iku, imken. So if so, nimtu kishurayich, your beams should reach the walls. Okay, we're going to have a miracle happen here. Tana higiu ad shiatzu amalakan va'amalakan. Not only did they reach the walls, they even jutted out an extra cubit. Okay, that was the miracle that happened. Some people say it wasn't that the beams themselves stretched, it was that an extra piece kind of attached onto the end of the beams. Okay, either which way they were, they did the trick. Tanya, there's another bright about this plemo. I saw that house. And the beams jutted out an amma there and an amma on either side. And they told me, that's the house that Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa did the roof, not because he was a handyman, but he did it with his prayers. Okay, famous house. Now they're going to ask the question, going back to the previous story, for Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, where did he have goats from? Exactly, Becky, I see you're asking. So where did he have goats? He was poor. And second problem, you're not allowed to have goats and sheep in Israel because they ruin the land. We're going to get to that. It comes up in Gittin. It comes up in other places as well. Comes up in Bava Kama. It's the issue of not having goats and sheep and all that. First of all, you might say, what are you talking about? Like now, right? When you think of the early people living in the country, you think of, plus nowadays, even there's shepherds and sheep and all that. And there was actually a whole question asked when people came back to the land, to Israel, whether they're allowed to have this or not. The rabbis instituted this gzera, not to have small animals, because they eat all the land and they destroy the land. So there was a whole question about whether this is still applicable today. So the Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Yosef have a whole argument about it. But Tzitz Eliezer says that since this gzera was null and void for so many years when we were in exile, because there wasn't really any Yishuv Eretz Yisrael anymore. There wasn't much going on here, and certainly there weren't a lot of Jews living here, and therefore the whole thing was not relevant. Therefore, when a gzera is not relevant for many years, in order to say it has to be reinstituted. That's the Tzitz Eliezer's claim, which is why he thinks that it's not relevant nowadays. There's all sorts of reasons to give why not. Anyway, it seems like this gzera is no longer relevant. So now he says, so two problems. Number one, how could he possibly have, because he didn't have anything. Number two, even if he did have, you're not allowed to use these. You're not allowed to have them. So Amar Rav Pinchas Maaseh, we're not going to really have an answer, by the way, of the second question. But Pinchas says, Maaseh v'avar adam echad al petach beito v'iniach sham tarnegolim. Situation happened, somebody left hens on his doorstep by accident. U'mitz'atan ishto shel Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. She finds them. She walks outside her house one day and finds these hens. Not only do we have to return the hens, but when she lays eggs, we can't even eat the eggs. You have to return those as well. You ready for the word again? Tom, they were tormenting them. And they had all these roosters, they had all hens, they had all these eggs, and they had nothing to do with them. So now what happens? So I assume they were tormenting them for two reasons. Number one, they were filling up their little teeny house that they didn't have space for, or maybe they had a small courtyard. Number two, it's like food in your face that you can't even eat, right? It's tempting and it's very frustrating for them. So what they do, but they weren't theirs, they couldn't eat them. So they sold them and took the money and bought the goats with the money and then said, when the guy returns, we'll give him the goats. So now we understand the goats weren't there. So it's very fascinating because when the neighbor came to complain, what did he say? Either you're right, and then bears will eat the goats, which means that if he was really wrong, that he was willing to sacrifice someone else's goats, which seems very strange. But I guess he was so confident. Anyway, it was the miracle man. So he knew what was going to happen, that he didn't really mean what he knew that was never going to happen. So anyway, he buys goats. One day, the guy who lost his hens comes by. This is where I left them. So Rabbi Chanina hears, he says, do you have some sort of marker to say these were mine, that I can know to trust you? Amarlo, hein, he says, yes. So he got them back, right? But he got back not the chickens, but he got back the goats. And these are the famous izim, right? You can see all these stories passing on. This is the famous house that he put together. These are the famous goats that were the ones who killed the bears with their horns. Okay, next story. That's the end of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa's stories, Mr. Miracle Man, who clearly had no issues using his miracles for all sorts of things, right? As opposed to those people who said before, oh, that was with a miracle, we can't touch that, right? And we can't benefit. Rabbi Lezer, so you see there's different approaches to this kind of thing. Rabbi Lezer ben Pedat, dechika le milta tu, he was also very poor. Avid milta, what happened? He did, milta in this case usually means something. He did something, but here it means he did bloodletting. Okay, now bloodletting, if you remember, we learned about it, that it was something they did for health purposes, but you're supposed to eat immediately after. It's not healthy if you don't. So what happened? He had no food. He had nothing to eat. Shaka baradetuma, he took a clove of garlic, and he put it in his mouth. That was all we had. So chalash libe, he gets weak. Some people say he faints. Vinim, and he falls into a sleep. The rabbis go to see how he's doing. Now, while he's sleeping, they see he's crying, he's laughing, and all of a sudden, a spark comes out of his forehead. Very strange. When he wakes up, why were you crying and why were you laughing? When I was sleeping, God came and sat with me. Right? Usually we go to God. This is interesting, almost like Yativi me. He sat with me. And he said to me, I said to him, Again, this word, etzte'er. How long am I going to suffer in this world? Do you want me to start the world all over again, do like a restart? And maybe you'll be born in a time when there's food in the world. So Amar Kameh. So I said to him, is that really possible? Amar but then I said to him, he asked the following question. Am I going to live more years than I've already lived? Like, let's say I'm 30 right now. Am I going to live another 40 years? Or am I going to live less years than I've already been alive? Like only 10 years, let's say. Amarli dechayet. The years that you already lived are greater than the years you're going to live. To which Rabbi Lazar says, Amar lekameh im kain lo be'ina. If so, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for you to flip the whole world for me to live less years than I've already lived. Amarli. So God said to me, Bahai igra da amar lo be'ina, because you said no, Yahiv nalach la'alma da'ate, I'm going to give you in the world to come, Tlesar naharvata de mishcha farsimon, 13 rivers of farsimon oil, right, balsam oil, which is the best. Dachyan kifrat v'diglat, they're going to flow like the Tigris and the Euphrates. Dima'anget behu, okay, that you're going to enjoy and bathe in them. Amre lekameh hai v'tulo. So interesting response. He says, that's it? Nothing else? You can't give me more than that? So Amar Le, and here it starts to get a little tricky. There's many, many different interpretations. So if I read something and you're reading something different, don't be surprised. Okay, I'll try not to get too complicated here, but it's very tricky to understand what exactly transpires. Amar li ulechaverach ma yahivna. So then he said to me, if I give you more, I'm going to have to take it away from your friends. Like there's only X amount that I can give. And therefore, I'm not going to take away from somebody else. To which Amar Le, I said to him, Va'anami gavra delatele be'ina. What, you think I was trying to get it from somebody else? No, either he was saying, I was trying to get it from someone who didn't belong in Olam Haba. Maybe I could have his share. Or maybe he was saying, I expected to get it from you, God. It wasn't like I thought you have a finite amount of things. Aren't you God? Can't you just bring anything? Or maybe it's unclear exactly what he's saying. And at that moment, and this becomes very unclear, it depends partly how you translate the beginning part, this part, what the reaction is, whether this is a positive reaction or a negative reaction. Rashi says it's all positive, but could be negative. So an angel came and basically clapped him on the forehead, and a spark came out. And God said to me, Elazar, my son, gire bach gire, I'm going to shoot my arrows at you. Now, shooting arrows doesn't sound very positive, but it could be shooting arrows of, Rashi says, of chedva, of happiness. Like, I'm shooting arrows. I'm so excited that you said this. Okay, whether he said it was good or whether God was upset with him for it, it's really not so clear. Okay, next, Rabbi Chama bar Chanina gazar ta'anita. We're back to stories of, this was stories of poverty and people who were suffering in life, and kind of ask God, how much longer am I going to be suffering? That's the connection between these two stories. It was Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa's wife to begin with, who again goes unnamed, which is interesting in and of itself. And then we have the story of Rabbi Elazar ben Pedat. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina gazar ta'anita v'lo ati mikra. So we're going to go back to the genre of stories where they pray for rain, they institute fast, and there's still no rain. And then how do they eventually get the rain to come? Amrule. So they said to him, to Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, V'harab Yeshua ben Levi gazar ta'anita v'ate mikra. Well, what happened to you? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was able to do it, so why can't you? Right? Not exactly the nicest thing to say to someone. But Amr Lahu, he said to them, Ha Ana, Ha Bar Levi. Look, there's me, and there's Ben Levi. I'm not the same person. I'm not as great as he is. What do you want from me? Amrle. So then they said, again, different interpretations here. Dinete v'nichavin date. Okay, nete means to bring. So who they're bringing, they're going to bring, and then we'll have a lot of intent. In other words, we'll pray together. Some people think they want to bring Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi to the place. Some people just say, no, well, if we don't have Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, at least maybe the power of all of us together will help. It's a little bit strange to say that because each interpretation is a bit weak, because to say they brought Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and his name isn't mentioned here at all, other than in the beginning where they said, you're not as great as he is, seems a little bit weird. So to say all of a sudden that they really brought him is a little bit strange. And the continuation of the story doesn't seem to support that reading. But to say that they got together and prayed, he already said, Gazar Ta'anita. When you make a Ta'anit, that means we get together and pray. But maybe he was trying to encourage them to pray extra hard. Unclear exactly. So, and it was them, by the way, who said it. Maybe the people said, let's all get together and pray. Maybe that was what happened. And because they said it, maybe that meant something more. Right? This seems to support the reason that the reading that it was all of them getting together, because maybe as a community, we can break. Tavra is to break. We can break our hearts, meaning make a change in ourselves. Okay. Tavra, is to break, because taf switches with shin. It's shavra, lishpol, to break. Well, it didn't work. They asked for, right? They plead for rachamim and no rain. Amar lahu, here I look at this kind of pep talk. He says to them, do you really want rain to come on your behalf? Amrulei haim. They said, yes, of course we do. So Amal, he calls out to the heavens, Rikia, Rikia, kasi panayich, cover your face, meaning bring clouds. Lo ikase, it didn't work. Amal, then he shouts up, Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Kama azim panei rakia. How stubborn is the face of the heavens? Ikase ba'ati mitra. That seems to get things going, and it's covered in clouds, and it starts to rain. Again, unclear what exactly brings the rain, but I think it's showing you that there's stages and there's hard work, and to get to the stage where God is going to help you, it doesn't come with a snap of a finger, but you have to work hard and do different things. Because again, it's not just a fast, like we said in the very beginning. We want people's actions to change. We want people to have an internal change. And that's something that can't just happen in a moment. Levi gazar ta'anit v'lo atimitra. Again, we have Levi, he makes a ta'anit, right? Another person, and it doesn't work. Amar lefanav, ribono shel olam, alita v'yashavta b'marom ve'en atam rachem abanecha. He says to God, what? You just went up to the heavens, left us alone, and you have no pity on us? Atamitra v'itla. So the rain came, but he became lame. He had to limp on his leg. Amar Rabbi Elazar, la'olam al yatiach adam dvarim k'lapei mala, sharei adam gadol yatiach dvarim k'lapei mala v'itla. You should never speak to God in that kind of brazen manner, because look what happened to Levi. So, Umanu, and who is this? He's talking about Levi. V'ha garmale, is that what caused it? Don't you remember the story? We learned this actually. V'ha Levi achve kida kamei de Revi v'itla. He was trying to do a bow, a prostration, and it was this special thing. It was almost like a yoga move where he puts his thumbs on the floor, he picks up his body. Again, there's different interpretations, something like a handstand, okay, but like a thumb stand, I would call it. And in the process of showing Rebbe how to do this, he becomes lame, okay? He hurts his body, right? A yoga accident. So isn't that what caused him to become lame? So they say, hava ha-garmale, it's both. And this is like the story with the wall that was falling down, right? When you're deserving of a punishment, it comes in a more natural way, though. So when he did that, that kind of he did something dangerous, and that brought in the ability for, whoever was punishing him to bring the punishment upon him. And also it happened in a more natural way, but it really was based in the sin that he did. He called out to God in this way. Rabbi Chia bar Luliyani, Shamina Mahanach Anane de Ka'amra. He heard talking clouds. You ever hear the clouds talking? So talking clouds in our story. He hears them talking to each other and saying, Native and Native Maya ba'amonu Moab. Let's bring rain on Ammon and Moab. Amar lefanav ribono shel olam, kshenatata Torah la'amcha Yisrael, chizarta al kol umot ha'olam v'lo kiblua. When you wanted to give the Torah, you went and offered it to all the other nations, and they didn't want it. Ammon and Moab said, no, thank you. We don't want your Torah. V'achshav ata noten la'hem matar, and now you're giving them rain? What's going on? And not for us? Shtu hacha, bring it here. Shadyuhu aduchte, so the rain came in their place. Again, this is someone speaking very brazenly to God. And that's the end of the story. We don't get any sort of critique about him. Darash Rabbi Chia bar Luliyani. Another thing he said, which is going to be similar about the issue of tzaddikim. Okay, it's similar because it's something else that the same person said, okay, rather than did, but first he did. Now we're going to have a drasha of his. My dichtiv, but it has to do with tzaddikim in general, which is our topic really. Miracle men are kind of like these righteous people. My dichtiv tzaddik katamar yifrach ke'erez bavanon yiskeh. This is a pasuk from Tehillim that we say in Mizmor Shir Yom HaShabbat, that the tzaddik will bloom like a tamar, like a date tree, and like the cedar, it will be like the cedars of Lebanon. Im nemar tamar, lama nemar eres. Im nemar eres, lama nemar tamar. Why do you need both the cedar and the palm tree? What's the difference between them, right? They're both big, tall, strong trees. Ilu nemar tamar velo nemar eres. If we just had dates and not cedar, hayiti omel, ma tamar engiz o machlif. It doesn't regenerate. If you cut it down, it won't regrow, right? You cut the trunk, that's the end of the tree. Af tzaddik, chas v'shalom, engiz o machlif. Maybe it's tzaddik, you would say is like that because it's like a tamar. If you cut it down, that's the end of it. L'chach ne'amar erez, right? Which some people, Rashi says, we're talking about tchiyat hametim, that there's no tchiyat hametim. It gets cut off, that's the end of his life. There's nothing beyond that. You could explain it possibly in other ways as well. Therefore, it says erez, because erez gizo machlif. Now you might say, if you remember the beginning of the Masechah, we talked about the kaneh, the reed, as compared to the cedar, and the reed gizo machlif, it regenerates, but not the erez. And here it actually says the erez does. So it's a bit of a contradiction. We're going to bring up a contradiction, not from the beginning of our Masechah, but from somewhere else that's going to raise that question in another minute. Ilu nemar erez v'lo nemar tamar hayiti omer. Ma erez eno seperot. There's no fruits. A date tree has fruits, but a cedar has no fruits. Maybe a tzaddik doesn't have fruits. Now, what are the fruits of his labor? Either it's children or it's olam haba or something like that again. So you might have thought it doesn't have fruits, like let's say his good deeds won't go rewarded. Okay, therefore it says both to teach you, both is going to have seperot and gizom machlif. Okay, that it regenerates. The area is gizom machlif, but wait, in a cedar tree, it really can change. It regenerates, it regrows. There's a bright that says, now, there's different ways you could buy a tree. You could buy the whole tree, or you could buy it for the wood. You're going to cut the wood, and then the tree belongs to the owner, and it'll regrow. So if you buy it for its wood only, how much can you cut down? You have to leave a tefach. Once you leave a tefach, the tree will regrow. That's a regular tree. With a regular sycamore tree, shnei tefachim. You need to leave a little more for it to regrow. Bibtulata shikma, sycamore that was never cut ever, shloshat tefachim, needs 3 handbreadths in order to grow. Bikanim ubikfanim, reeds and vines. Minapkak ulamala, from the knot. Okay, there's these vines coming up, and the reeds. There's some sort of lower knot, which is usually where they prune them from. So from there, basically, and then they'll regrow. Bidkalim uba'arazim. Now here's our main thing. Notice what things are together: the palm tree, which are the dates, and the sycamore, the cedar. Chofer lemata umashlish. You can dig all the way down to the bottom and even take out the roots. Why? Because he knows you're cutting it down for the wood. He knows it's not going to grow again. So he's basically selling you the entire tree. So what do you see here? An area is just like the tamal. So why it doesn't make any sense according to what we just said. And this is something we've learned before. There's different types of erez cedar trees. Kedarabba bar Rav Huna, as he said, Amar Rabba bar Huna, Asara minei arazim hem shenemar aratem b'midbar erez shita v'hadas v'gomer. There's all different kinds of erez, as we see from this verse, which doesn't really mean that it's different kinds of erez, but we learn there's a tradition that there's 10 different types of cedar trees, and therefore there's the one that regrow and there's the ones that don't regrow, and therefore the contradiction is resolved in that way. Okay, next story. Tanu Rabbanam. Aseh Rabbi Eliezer shegazar 13 Taaniyot al hatzibur v'lo yardu gshamim. So now he instituted 13 fasts, which is the maximum number, and nothing happened. But achrona, so the end of the last day comes. They're all in shul praying. They get up. It's chilo hatzibur. Let's say it. Everybody goes to leave, right? Kind of, okay, we're done. I don't know what we're going to do now. Amar lahem tikantim kfarim la'atzmachem. What are you burying? You're digging your graves. Like, if you walk out of this room, that's the end of it. You're going to die. So, Ga'u kol ha'am b'bchiyah, they all started to cry. V'yardu gshamim, right? Again, this is about moving the people. He moved them to cry, and then the rains came. Shuv ma'aseh b'Rabbi Eliezer, she'yarad lefnei hateva, v'amar 24 brachot v'lo na'ana. Okay, another case, by the way, this is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, the famous, right? The one who gets excommunicated in the Tanuro Shel Achnai story, the oven. So anyway, he says the 24 blessings, which you say on the last set of fasts, the 24 brachot in Shemona Esrei. He was the chazan, and the prayers didn't get answered. Yarad Rabbi Akiva acharav. So Rabbi Akiva now becomes the chazan, and right after him, Amar Ravinu Malkeinu, right? God, our King, Ein lanu melech el ata. You're our one and only King. Avinu Malkeinu lema'ancha rachem aleinu. For your sake, have pity on us, have mercy on us. V'yardu gshamim, and the rains came. So now, right, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus is kind of stood up by Rabbi Akiva. Havumir rananei Rabbanan. The rabbis start to, say bad things about Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, like, well, you're not worthy. Yatzda bat kol. That's why I wanted to remind you of the other story, because the heavenly voice comes down, just like in the story of Tanuro Shel Achnai, trying to prove that Rabbi Eliezer isn't so bad, although this one is a little bit not so clear, and says, Lo amra lo mipnei shezeh gadol mizeh. It's not that Rabbi Akiva is greater than Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus. Ela shezeh ma'aviro midotav v'zeh eino ma'aviro midotav. One of them is willing to pass over things, like get over things quickly and not get angry at people who do things against him. And this one is not, right? We know that Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus was known to be very clear in his thinking and not budging any way in any direction. But Rabbi Akiva is a much more even-keeled, forgiving kind of person, and therefore he ends up, his prayers are heard. That's kind of a trait that's important for bringing rains. Even though in the first story, Eliezer ben Horkanus was able to move the people, but sometimes if you're not so forgiving, then it's not so easy to move the people. Tanu Rabbanan. Now we're getting to a bit more of halachic stuff, okay, after all these agadatot, just in time for the end of the chapter. Tanu Rabbanit ad matai yuag shamim yordim vatzibor poskim mitanitam. How much rain has to come down that we basically decide, okay, we don't need the fasts anymore? Because a little bit of rain, right? We need a lot of rain. How much rain is a lot of rain? Kimelo berach hamachresha. There's different ways to understand what the knee, berach is knee, what the knee is describing. Is it describing the ground, the furrow, or is it describing the plow? To me, it sounds better like the plow, but there are different interpretations, like a knee's length of the plow. In other words, where the plow goes into the furrow, and there's some depth there where it basically fills up the furrow where the machresha goes in. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Chachamim omrim, it depends on the type of land, the rabbis say. Becharevat, if it's very dry, so the water has to go down a tefach, because that's already a lot for one hand's breadth if it's really dry land, because for it to be absorbed into very dry land, you need more rain. If it's bebenonit, average soil, then tfachim, 2 tfachim down. If it's ba'avudat, it's stuff that's already been plowed, ground that's already been plowed, 3 tfachim. Then it has to go even further down for it to be a significant amount, enough amount of rain. Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Remember, we talked about, does the rain come from above? Does it come from below? We talked about how there's waters above, waters below. Now we're talking about the tahom, which is usually the depths, but they're talking about tahom under the ground and a tahom above the ground, which is in the heavens. So now, we had this image once before that it's like a chatan going likrat kala, that the rains from above meet the rains from below. So that's what he's saying here. There's no, if a tefach comes down milamala, the tahom, the water from underneath, greets it 3 tfachim. It comes up 3 tfachim. V'hatanya tfachim, there's a different source that says it comes up 2 tfachim. So how do we resolve that? Lo kasha, kamba avudat, kamba she'en avudat. It depends on what type of land. And which way it goes, there's different interpretations. So I'm going to just leave that to your imagination, whether in worked land, soil, it comes up more, or maybe it comes up less. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Again, this idea of the tahom, the upper and the lower waters, when we do the water libations on Sukkot, which is all to kind of bring the rains, tahom omer lechavero, one says to the other, the upper one says to the lower ones, abba memayich, go start bringing your waters up. In other words, the merits of our pouring the water libations brings the water up from the ground. I hear the voices of 2 of our friends. What are the 2 friends? It's the wine and the water libations going together. I hear their voices and it's time to come. And it's like a wake-up call. Shene'amar, how do we know this? From a verse in Tehillim, Tahom al Tahom koreh lekol tzinorecha. The Tahom calls to the other Tahom for the voices of your pipes. Remember the pipes in the Mizbeach and the altar where the water went down and the wine went down. There were these tubes underneath that are called like pipes here. Amarabba, Lididi Chazi Lihai Ridya. I saw Ridya, who's the angel in charge of rain. Dami Leigla, he looks like a calf. Upirsa Svate, his lips are open. The Kaima Bain Tahoma Tata Litahomi Eli, he stands between the depths of above, the waters above and the waters below. Litahomi Eli Amar Lo Chashor Memayach. He says to the ones above, bring down your rain. Litoma Tata Amar Eba Memayach. He says to the ones below, bring up your rains. Shene'amar Hanitzanim Niru Ba'aretz. Okay, the Nitzan is the first, right? So we're looking, it's the first buds. And the continuation of that verse is from Shiur Shirim. Eit HaZamir, it's the time of the pruning. Higia, Vikol HaTor Nishma Ba'artzenu. And voice of the Tor. Tor is a shore, is an ox. So that's why they're saying the Ridya is like an ox, and this is a reference to the Ridya. Now we have this debate that was in the Mishnah. At what point in the day? First, we had how many rains need to come. And then they were saying, at what point in the day do the rains come? That we stop the fast, or do we continue fasting? So one said, Tanakama said, Netzach Hama, from sunrise. And Rabbi Eliezer in the Mishnah said, Chatzot, midday, right? If it's after midday, then you still continue your fast. According to Tanakama, if it's after sunrise, you have to continue your fast, even though it rained. So now we're going to see those 2 opinions in the name of other people. And then we're going to see a third. Tano Rabbanan, if it's before sunrise, you don't have to continue fasting. But if it's after sunrise, you have to finish. Divrei Rabbi Meir. So Tanakama is Rabbi Meir, which is often in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kodem Chatzot Lo Yashlimu Lachar Chatzot Yashlimu. It's midday. That's the cutoff. Rabbi Yossi Omer Kodem Tesha Sha'ot Lo Yashlimu Lachar Tesha Sha'ot Yashlimu. 9 hours into the day, toward the end of the day, even toward the end of the day. Right, mincha time, around 9 hours into the day, close to mincha time. That's the hour that, right, you, even if it came as late as that, up to 9 hours, you could stop your fast at that point. How do we know this? And this is a very strange proof. I'm not going to give you a clear-cut answer here. But Shekematzinu ba'achav melech Yisrael shitanem mitesha sharu lamala shene'emal hara'ita ki nichna achav. Whole showdown with Eliyahu and Achav. In the end, Achav gives in, and it seems like according to them, he fasted. And it must have been in the afternoon. How they know it was in the afternoon certainly doesn't say so in the verses. But some people say the whole story happened on the exact same day that Navot, the whole story with Navot happened, and all these other things happened all on the same day. And therefore, it must have been late afternoon by the time this happened. That's one of the interpretations. There's some other ones. They're a little unclear. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya Gazar Taanit, another story. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, we saw yesterday also some stories about him. He made a fast. Yardu lahem kshamim la'achar netzach hama. Okay, and the rains came after sunrise. Savar lash laminu. He thought, I have to continue my fast because netzach hama is the cutoff point. Amar le Rabbi Ami, kodem chatzot v'achar chatzot shaninu. No, our version of the mission is before chatzot, after chatzot. We don't hold by that opinion. Shmuel Katan Gazar Ta'anita. Okay, you're going to see is a little bit critical. He institutes a fast. V'yardulahem kshamim kodem netzach hama. Starts to rain before netzach hama, before they even started their day of prayers. So you think that's great, right? They say, wow, look how great we are. We didn't even have to start praying, and God already answered our prayers. To which he says, Amar lahem, emsholachem mashal. Let me explain a parable to explain the situation to you. Lema davar domeh, to what is this similar to? Le'eved shemavakes pras merabo. A servant comes to his master to ask for a gift. Amar lahem, shnu lo va'alish makolo. The king says, before he even gets there, give it to him. I don't even want to hear his voice. When God answers you before you even pray, that's a slap in the face. It's saying God doesn't want our prayers. So Shiv Shmuel Katan Gazar Ta'anita, another day he made a fast, a different year or a different time. The end of the day, the rains come. So they say, now we have what you wanted, right? Because God heard our prayers all day. He wanted to hear a full day of prayers. That's a great thing. This is not a good thing. Here's the parable. Here comes again this yitztaer, the suffer. Make him suffer, make him struggle, make him, beseech me seriously. Then I'll answer him, right? After he undergoes a whole, struggle. So what does he want? What's he looking for? That's the key. And we saw some cases like that previously where the Chazan got up, he said, bring the winds, and the winds came. Bring the rains, and the rains come. That's perfect. But if you have to wait till the end of the day, that's not good. And if you don't even get to pray at all, that's not good either. With that, we will end our daf. Have a great day, everybody. A lot to think about.